Welcome back, everyone. You're here. You've made it to the end of 2020. You're still with us. We've got you. I hope you have your hand on our pulses because we're going to bring you some awesome news today. We got Lizz Winstead, Moji Alawode-El, myself, Marie Khan. We're here together in the Feminist sleeper cell to continue break down 2020 for y'all. How are you two doing?
You know, I mean, I'm ready for this year to end, but I've really been enjoying these conversations. So this is exciting.
I love doing video podcasts. I feel like we should do more of them, and it's really fun to celebrate. It's our 99th episode, and because our 100th episode's on Christmas, and we knew no one would listen, so we decided to divide it up into 3 trimesters to really celebrate our 99th episode profoundly and bigly, but also there's some big things that happen in the year, and we wanted to kind of do our version of the year in review. So we thought, why not 1, not 2, but 3 video pods that hit some super big subjects and the big stories of 2020. And this episode, Moji, is about what?
Woo! We are talking regulation.
That's a party.
It's a whole party. You know what I mean? There's other parties you could go to, but it's COVID time, so not really. You got your regulation party, and so that's where we all are. So well, yeah, we're gonna.
Yeah, no, I'm just excited because I think so often people confuse regulations and legislation, and this is a good deep dive into, you know, there's people that get voted in who make laws that are trash, and then those people get to appoint people to positions of power who make laws then you didn't vote for those people, or make regulations, and those regulations are sometimes even more terrifying than the laws themselves.
And seriously, if you're not a news junkie, a lot of the times you don't even know the names of these people, right? Like I couldn't give you a deep dive of all the people who are in like, you know, appointed positions in New York. And this is where I live. Like you really have to care to find these things out, or they have to be horrible. They have to be horrible.
So we'll bring the experts to you to break it down, and then you'll be excited to do the deep dive rather than, oh my God, how did this happen to me? It's like, well, it's by design, boring and hidden and everything else. Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty great. I'm excited to get into our regular. I'm excited to get regular. No, that's not right. But
reset, do that fiber cleanse. Like, come on, 2021.
Mm-hmm. I feel like our guest is kind of a fiber cleanse because they know how to get rid of the shit. They know how to make you feel better, and they know how to make it stop from happening again. And they also say, some of this is on you. You know, you can't just say, I want this, I want to have a better stool, but I don't want to participate in it. You got to participate. I'm sure she's not excited about us moving into bringing her on in a duty analogy, but I feel like 2020 is a shit bath, so maybe she can help us. Molly, who is our wonderful guest today?
So I'm actually Moji, but her name is Molly.
Did I say Molly?
You did.
I'm so excited because our guest is Molly.
We're gonna have a trilogy today, but yeah, her name is Molly Bangs. She's pretty incredible. She's a writer, an advocate, a researcher on reproductive health and justice and rights, and she's also, again, the director of Equity Forward, which is a pretty amazing organization. It's a watchdog org that is made up of teams of lawyers, researchers, experts, just people who like are super committed to reproductive rights, reproductive justice, and they're out here trying to eliminate the damage that these anti-choice, anti-reproductive rights people just inflict on all of us. So basically they do God's work.
Yes.
Anyway, so let's welcome Molly Bangs. All right, Molly, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we do a lot of deep dives into legislation on this podcast, but so many roadblocks to abortion access come in the form of regulations, which are a dirty little secret in our democracy, as they can be used for good and evil. So can you explain the difference between legislation and regulation, and how much power people or politicians who aren't voted into office have in creating and enforcing these regulations?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that we're tackling this topic today because I think honestly, even having worked in the policy space for some time myself, it wasn't really until I joined Equity Forward a few years back and started digging into these regulations or rules on a daily basis. And under the Trump administration, like really in particular, just seeing how much power federal elections have, not just in terms of who's in the White House, but or even at the secretary level of agencies, but political appointees that the president has the power to put in these leadership positions within agencies who is behind regulations. So to be clear, totally crystal clear for any newcomers, regulations or rules are coming out of federal agencies, so the executive branch. You know, any and all agencies have these rulemaking powers and then have sole enforcement over rules changes that are coming out of their agencies as well. They often govern a lot of money as well, federal programs, any change, actually to back up, even any programs that are being created, those can come out of rules and regulations. Changes to them as well, even if said programs may have come out of the legislative branch, they can be changed due to rules and regulations within federal agencies. So I think I'll stop there in terms of the initial top lines, but they're super important and really glad to be digging into them all with you today.
Just a follow-up question. Do the regulations work the same on the state level as they do on federal? Because I feel like you brought up federal a lot here. Is it similar on the state level?
To be totally honest, I think that the answer to that is a bit nuanced as it can change from state to state. So I think the overall framework, though, if we want to talk about the state level, is similar because state governments mimic our federal government in similar ways. It can get, you know, just to give like a quick example in terms of repro, it can get a little bit complicated because often at states you have, you know, rather than a replica of like the Department of Health and Human Services, you can have often like a Department of Health and then also a Department of Human Services. And programs are like split out in a lot of ways that create, I guess, that can create additional regulatory hurdles. But the general framework in terms of executive and legislative separation is in place in most cases that I've looked at.
So can you, I guess, but before I want to get into some, you know, agencies that have big regulatory power when it comes to repro, well, everything, but we'll talk about repro specifically. But I'm wondering if you could just expand a little bit about the regulation process, right? So let's have a fake regulation, you know, about anything. Like, who gets to ultimately propose the regulation and who ultimately decides whether it goes, and what powers do we have as citizens to block a regulation from happening versus legislation?
Sure. So these regulations can come out of, you know, they'll come out of usually offices within an agency, and usually what happens in terms of the steps, I guess, if we want to think of it that way, is there'll be a proposed rule that is, or in some cases, if we're talking about funding, like a funding notice that is posted usually to the federal registrar as well as the specific agency and or office homepage, and it's announced. And then as citizens, we are all supposed to get 2 weeks. We have a 2-week period where we're supposed to be able to submit public comment on these rules changes. This did not happen all the time by any means under the Trump administration, which was extremely frustrating, especially for a lot of us advocates. You know, and there was a lot of intentional sort of hurry up and wait, like you know, example of Title X, for instance, the Trump administration delayed that rules announcement and grant application notice by months. So, there's like a time period where we would normally be expecting this, and then it wouldn't come, and then it would be dropped on us last minute. Anyway, so they're supposed to be posted, and then there's with a 2-week time period in which everyday citizens can submit public comment on a regulation, and then it is finalized at a date thereafter, and posted as a final rule. After that, I would say the way in which these regulations are often checked is through the courts. So again, I think maybe we'll be diving into some of these examples as related to like Title X and other regulatory issues that we've struggled with a lot in the movement over the past few years. But I would say that that's the check that is often taken after these rules and regulations come out of federal agencies.
Well, and I think it's interesting, like you say, there's a proposed change to a rule, and then and then there's 2 weeks public comment. Like, it's not like it's they're advertising it on The Voice, like
No,
the public is not learning that some major thing in their lives is about to change. It always seems like it's secret, and like
no, you have to dig for it.
Yeah, and who's digging, right? I mean, people are so busy, and so when we think for abortion, we think of the Department of Health and Human Services, and in doing our research over the past couple of years, we became so obsessed with what agencies are under the Department of Health and Human Services, and that Trump has flooded the Department of Health and Human Services with so many anti-abortion extremists. I mean, I didn't know until a couple of years ago that the FDA is under HHS, and they create telemedicine and abortion pill regulations, or that the whole Kids in Cages program was created under the Department of Health and Human Services by who? An anti-abortion extremist with no experience in kids or immigration. So
yep,
I'd love for you to touch on some of these things and some other key appointed players that are like populating this particular agency, and how they profoundly screwed with abortion access.
Well, good news for us, bad news for the world is that we have got more than enough material to dig into there from the past 4 years. So I think the first thing that you touched on, Liz, that I think is a really important point is how complex the overall structure of these agencies can be, and it's certainly not user friendly in terms of trying to find regulations or even figure out like which office under the umbrella of an agency these policies are supposed to be coming from. So that's where a lot of organizations like mine and other allies in the field have come in that do accountability work in trying to really carry through this belief that personnel is policy, and figuring out who these appointees are. A large theme that I'll just note before I dive into some of these specifics is that we did see the elevation of a lot of really, really, really extreme anti-abortion folks across not just HHS, but many agencies within the Trump administration. And we also saw a number of rules changes that gave these folks more power than they have had under previous administrations. So I guess, yeah, I'll just dive right into my first example then. I know that I listened to your podcast last week, and I know you all were talking about Title X a bit and wanted to dive into that today. So yeah, let's just get started talking about our nation's only federal family planning program.
Yeah, please explain Title X. We can't explain Title X enough, because people always think Title X is Title IX when I talk to them, and I'm like, no.
Exactly. So yeah, our federal family planning program, Title X, was designed specifically to ensure that low-income people in the United States have access to reproductive health services. So, that's everything from birth control access to STI screenings, cancer screenings, really great stuff, right? So we've seen, unfortunately, this program attacked in a number of ways that pertain directly to regulations, as we're talking about today. I think one of the more highly publicized ways in which Title X was attacked by the Trump administration was through the Domestic Gag Rule, mirroring what the administration has been doing globally as well. Just to recap for listeners, I guess, the gag rule prohibited Title X recipients, so health clinics that are getting federal funds for family planning services, from either referring out for abortions, and it also created a whole set of really stringent requirements in terms of separating any abortion services that they may have been provided from Title X funded services. So to be very, very clear, Title X federal dollars were never going to abortion, and these recipients were already required to demonstrate that that was the case. These new requirements put forth by the Domestic Gag Rule were specifically targeting abortion centers to, make their lives miserable and expend resources that they didn't have. And there's actually been some really incredible analysis coming out of allies like our friends at Guttmacher that have looked into just how damaging that rule has been. So I bring that up first because I think that, I know it's awful, but I think that got like a good amount of press coverage. What I think is less known that and that was a rule, to be clear, right? So that is coming out of the HHS Office of Population Affairs, which is charged with administering the program. Something important for us to know is that under the Trump administration, this has been run by two people. First, Valerie Huber, and then someone named Diane Foley. I see head shaking, like we may be familiar with these people. For those who aren't.
Valerie Huber stories, but please, let's give the good news about Valerie.
Like, honestly, all I can say, like, as we're talking about Title X, is that the Trump administration put two abstinence-only advocates in charge of the program that is literally supposed to give people birth control. So, like, honestly, the too long don't read, like, that is...
Also, didn't they even go so far as to say you can't receive Title X funding if you even talk or about birth control or talk about abortion? Like,
yeah, so that was like the gag nature of the rule, exactly. So it was like it was a really, really extreme rule that we saw, and I think it rightfully so got a lot of attention because of it. But hand in hand with that, something that I want to point out is that under the leadership of Huber and Foley, we actually saw the grant application processes for Title X change drastically over the course of the past 4 years as well. And these are also regulatory decisions that are being made. So a ton of things changed, right? Like, first, there used to be a panel of like independent experts that would review the Title X grantee applications each year when they came in. This shifted the first year that the Trump administration was under control of the program, so that it would give a political appointee, namely Valerie Huber or Diane Foley, final say over who was getting funds for this program. What did we see as a result of this? Something that also came up on your show last week, which is, for the first time ever, funds went to an anti-abortion conglomerate, Obria, which is a really extremist group that they've done a lot of awful things. But again, top lines, they don't believe in birth control. They've promoted, a lot of medically unproven procedures such as abortion reversal on their websites. And these are the kind of folks who, under the Trump administration's Office of Population Affairs, are receiving federal family planning funds. Meanwhile, because of the domestic gag rule that we just discussed, all the Planned Parenthoods, pulled out of the program. Love to use that term when we're talking about this. I remember a lot of headlines just going crazy.
I mean, the one time I've been a full advocate of pulling out was when Planned Parenthood decided to just provide care instead of take government funds.
Exactly. So, we're just, it's been a pretty awful situation when it comes to the family planning program the past few years, and the Biden administration really has their work cut out for them in terms of restoring and protecting that program.
It's also so insidious how, and I know this is the terminology, the recipient is the center of care, the clinic, what have you, but like the true recipient is the person on the ground, their family, that individual, that is the community this is supposed to protect and serve and empower and center and listen to. And you've outlined how none of that is going on. And yet these recipients are big bad Planned Parenthood that's painted like this. And it's like, no, you're hamstringing doctors and medical professionals, and you are truly creating death sentences for members of our population.
Right. And that's the way we should be talking about this, because they purposefully remove the very human component out of the storyline completely. And it's absolutely egregious.
And I think it's the only way that you can get away with it. If they remove the humanity from it, you forget we're talking about people, and people we know, and people we are, you know? Mm-hmm. And so that is, you know, it's why you say troops when you talk about war. You know, it's why you desensitize people to the ramifications of it. And it's just enraging.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, that's one area where it's really important to understand regulations, I guess, and the power that they really do have, even for, as we spoke about, these programs that I'm sure a lot of people don't know are, you know, directly funding their healthcare access and their you know, services that they need.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I know. It's
it's really dark. It's really dark.
Really dark. I know. It is. It's really dark.
Yeah.
So do you think in looking at 2020, like, this is going to be a crazy question, but do you think there's even any way to identify a worse federal regulation? Is it was it the Title 10 funding?
Title 10 was definitely bad. But I mean, we could probably talk for days about the awful regulations that came out of this administration. And I mean, rest assured that, you know, the movement writ large, we're watching all of them in terms of ensuring that they're reversed and ensuring that they never happen again. I think that one area that might be worth us touching on, because it really ties into this broader theme of, you know, believing in science and facts, and taps into the fact that we are still very much in the middle of a devastating pandemic right now. But this is the issue of the Trump administration's restrictions to research using fetal tissue. That's what I'm thinking of. Do you all want to dig into that?
Well, I mean, I think it's always important to dig into it because of the nature of the hypocrisy around it, and also too because the reason Trump no longer has COVID was because of fetal tissues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not bleach. Fetal tissue.
Not bleach.
Not bleach.
Not sunlight.
Yeah. I mean, look, like, the Trump administration, very much in hand with anti-abortion advocates, successfully banned HHS and NIH funding for research using fetal tissue. Why is this important for those who aren't familiar? Fetal tissue has been used for tons of life-saving research, you know, literally responsible for vaccines for everything from measles, mumps, rubella, like, has actively been used in research. Exactly, for everything like Zika to COVID. And you know, these restrictions may have very well slowed down the research community's ability to research and respond to the coronavirus. So to your point, Liz, like, the hypocrisy was just outstanding. And you have like Alex Azar, who as recently as like this week is standing up and giving speeches just talking about their commitment to science and evidence in the COVID response, when really every step of the way for the past 4 years, they've done everything that they can to just cater to the anti-abortion lobby, even when it has direct ramifications for vaccine development for the, pandemic that the world is going through. And yes, to your point, it's okay when it's used to treat the president, but for everyone else, I don't know. Anyway, I guess just to give like a few quick examples of how this was accomplished by regulatory action, and also touches on your earlier point of like how people can get involved in the regulatory process. I think this was a case that really demonstrated like how much sort of insider baseball action there often is around these rulemaking processes coming out of agencies. Like we know that that Brett Giroir, who was charged with, who was behind a lot of these restrictions to fetal tissue research at HHS, directly met with federal anti-abortion groups who urged him to ensure that research would be ethical, and would do away with these human fetal tissue cells, and was successful in their efforts to do so. It's transparent, right? It's like back when there was a Republican held Congress before the midterms, we saw some of these same folks from like Charlotte Lozier Institute, who we know had a hand in influencing the fetal tissue restrictions, show up and testify like at a hearing on the same topic. Like it's all the same people. Folks who have been in this space for a while will recognize some of them as having also opposed stem cell research. So and they, under this administration, had the ears of the people who could make the regulatory changes around this type of research.
Well, I would just like to say too that, we oftentimes say that these anti-abortion people are crackpots, but they are now getting elected to state legislatures. They have the ear of the Department of Health and Human Services. And Charlotte Lozier, for our listeners who don't know, we talk about the Charlotte Lozier Institute a lot, but they are a made-up research company funded by the Susan B. Anthony list, which is the Emily's list of anti-abortion people. And they literally create research to prove whatever their bullshit point is they're trying to make around abortion. So if they want to say that stem cell research is ineffective for some reason, then they'll just create a thing, and then they'll cite the research of this, and it's a shell game of anti-abortion nutbags.
100%. Yeah, it's just the like sham research arm of the Susan B. Anthony list. That's all that they are. And they've really ingrained themselves. I think there was a decent amount of coverage about this past summer, but like understandably so, it may not have been across the desks of every American catching up on the news. But another regulation that came out of HHS on this front lent itself to the establishment of this fetal tissue ethics review board. That actually was charged with, looking over all of the new research proposals using fetal tissue research. And we at Equity Forward dug into them and found that not only did the majority of them have expressly anti-abortion views and noted opposition to fetal tissue research and stem cell research, but I think 5 of them actually had clear associations with the Charlotte Lozier Institute. So, it's like, come on, it's almost making it too easy for all of us in the research space. But this is who is behind these efforts, and they're not going away. They're still going to be around. So these are some of the areas, and I think this issue of fetal tissue research, even though it's niche, and honestly I now know way more about it than I ever wanted to know, it is an important one to look to, because they are pressing on the gas even in the face of COVID. And that, to me, it was like, I remember, my coworkers and I, we were like, okay, like, are they going to keep pushing? Are they going to keep pushing? And I think some of them have now tried to find a way to talk about like the treatment as like they've made some weird distinguishment between what is considered ethical and what is not. And maybe it directly ties to like when the president has COVID. I don't know. But like
this president has COVID.
This president, exactly. Like, I mean, we'll see. With hopefully Biden will remain just absolutely healthy and safe, and we won't have to see that scenario unfold. But like, seriously, all jokes aside, I think their rhetoric around this issue is going to be really interesting to watch. And to your point, like, we have QAnon folks in federal Congress now, like, in addition to state. So like, what are they going to be saying? What are they trying to do?
Exactly. And that's the whole thing. Go ahead, Moji.
I feel like in general, we're finding that they're pressing the gas on things, to use your phrase, on things that almost seem settled. Like we all know that abortion's a trigger word for a lot of people, right? Birth control, I don't know why, but some people also find it difficult to talk about that. But like fetal tissue research, like, okay, we use that to advance health for like all the people, even people who like don't have sex. Like, what is happening?
Well, I think for so many people, they are creating an environment where they literally are trying to say that abortion providers are coercing people to have abortions for fetal tissue research, when they don't even understand how the stem cells of fetal tissue, like the vaccine that Trump got, or not the vaccine, the treatment that Trump got was extracted from a cell line that came from the 1970s.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, no one cares about Henrietta Locke, about like, if you care about ethical origins and stuff, look.
Yeah, then let's go down that path.
Problems.
That's like a modern gynecology.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Look at that. Don't go after a system that is trying to improve and get better, an existing research stream, all of this. That is, it enrages me, the hypocrisy of them.
Yeah, I feel like
so incredibly
hypocrisy. So I'm clearly today the state person, and I brought it up before about like what's going on in the states, but we're still in 2020 right this minute, and it's been total trash this year, especially when COVID hit, and especially early on when it hit, and a lot of governors decided that COVID and COVID movement restrictions were great reasons to shut down abortion clinics. So can you talk about how governors have used during this current pandemic regulations just to screw access to abortion care?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Moji, I think you hit the nail on the head, but it was absolutely, for me, like looking at that initial attack on abortion when COVID first came down in the US, this is a new low even for the antis. Like, that was honestly my first reaction. Like, I'm very rarely surprised anymore, but like, even that, I was like, okay, they're really going there. And what they did in, I think, at least 11 states, governors put out these public health emergency declarations classifying abortion as a non-essential medical procedure.
Talk to anybody who's an abortion and see if they think it's essential or not.
It's
like, yeah, let's just put a pause on that.
Like your belly button stops it.
Like it's not a moving train. Like you can't stop.
Like, yeah. So in addition to just being like absolutely egregious and insulting, literally doesn't even make sense. So that's one thing. Also keep in mind that this is like happening in states, you know, obviously like Ohio is one of them, as always, like that already have really stringent requirements in terms of wait times and things like that. So just trying to create an additional hurdle clearly to pregnant people being able to get abortions. You know, I guess the good news is that these regulations have been extremely legally embattled because they're just blatantly trying to deny people their constitutional rights. So I believe that that the courts have blocked them in all cases. You all can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's right. That's true. But
yeah,
the jerky nature of a person with an appointment and the clinics trying to stay open, and like even clinics that had, some of them had to like pause for 24 hours so the injunction would go away, and that so they could get a
100%.
stay. right? And also, when the governors declared that, it also meant if they weren't essential workers, then they couldn't get like the PPE and like all the stuff that went along with that. And so we were sewing masks for clinics and like doing all this
Mhm.
visual aid for clinics to make sure that they could get the stuff that they needed to actually provide care. Because like, what kind of like, here's like, it just drives me insane. We're all quarantined. If you're quarantined with a partner that can impregnate you and you can get pregnant, if you might not want to have that pregnancy, might not be at the best time, okay, during a pandemic, right? And so I think people were getting pregnant, they were home more. You've watched everything on Netflix. Do you want to fuck? That sounds good, because we watched all of the, the Crown. So let's get to it. And so you're just finding more people needing access to care and more restrictions on people getting it in a time when it is paramount for people to be able to have as many options available to them when they're housing insecure, food insecure,
Right.
job insecure. Just wow.
Right. I mean, honestly, this scenario that you just paid out, I think it just always bears repeating, like, how much of an economic issue abortion really is. And like, it doesn't really get clearer than a situation you're in the middle of a pandemic, like, especially if you're, I don't know, a millennial, chances are you lost your job or you had some form of wage reduction.
Mhm.
As you said, probably not the best time to embark on, raising a human being. So you go to exercise your constitutional right only to find out that once again your state has made like a last ditch effort to try and prevent you from doing so. And the only other thing I'll add, oh my God, when you were describing like the it's been such a year. You were just describing sewing the masks, and I literally just had a flashback to like the days in March when we were all, it was like Revolutionary War era, like hand sewing.
Mhm.
Are people going to be sleeping?
Yep.
Am I going to have soldiers in my living room?
I just
Am I going
exactly
to be
like,
tending to people?
You're gonna bet
I
the
can't
broth.
believe how much we've been through. I can't believe it. That felt like it was like 8 million years ago, and I don't know how we've made it to the end of 2020. I'm now finding myself in like the unfortunate position where I'm like, I mean, I knew that we couldn't explain away everything that happened this year with 2020, but like we can't say that anymore after New Year's. So it's just gonna be like, okay, like 2021, everything is still terrible.
Oh, I have totally, in some ways, completely giving up on 2021. I'm like, we'll survive it too, and then maybe 2022 things will be good again. But
Yeah,
like, we've been such gloom and doom in this conversation.
I mean, I feel like
I'm
I'm
sorry.
if we win Georgia. If we win Georgia, then there's hope because we'll have a Senate that can like get some things done.
Senate
And
and-
certainly Biden can roll back like this shitty ass Title 10 stuff and change up some of these folks who are running these agencies. Marie?
Yes, we're all excited about this personally. So with Biden Harris coming in, and you've touched on this, these are folks that are appointed.
Yep.
This is why your administration matters. They are tapped, and they're looking at California's Attorney General Javier Becerra to be considered as the next Secretary for Health and Human Services. And we've tried to save this time in the podcast because each week we touch on things, but we really want your opinion, your thoughts on him, and if you could talk about his prior record on abortion access and care, because like we've said, there's so few folks that we can like really like get behind fully.
Yeah.
It's even harder when you're looking at many elected politicians are cisgender males. Like what is this type of individual? What are you hoping for that they could bring in that role?
Definitely. Well, yeah, the good news is that this is definitely a happier pivot for this very doom and gloom conversation that I've brought upon all of you. But I will say that we have been tracking actually a number of nominations of interest across not just key positions in Health and Human Services, but a number of other federal agencies as well, with specific eye to reproductive health rights and justice track records. And we will continue to do that. I would say that broadly speaking, the nominations do really signal the Biden-Harris administration's intention to build, build an administration that will reverse a lot of these awful policies, whether they stemmed out of regulations or not, that we've been talking about. But when Javier Becerra got named, I guess that was a little over, that was earlier in December. We were just so excited. I mean, for those who don't know, Becerra has a long record defending repro from the time that he was a member of Congress to his tenure as California's Attorney General. And we have every reason to believe that he'll continue this really good work coming into the Biden-Harris administration. I mean, just to point on a few examples, and I think you actually touched on this in your last podcast when you were talking a little bit about anti-abortion centers, which you really aptly referred to as theater clinics, I think.
Clinics. Oh, we did. We used the term.
You used theater clinics, yeah. And I was like, that's a good one. I haven't heard that before.
I think theater clinic is a good thing we need to start spreading around.
Definitely. But yeah, I mean, Becerra has just been really, really incredible. Like, he was literally at the forefront of California's efforts to push back against these like completely bullshit sort of free-for-all passes for anti-abortion centers or theater clinics, whatever you want to call them, in California, which obviously, as a Supreme Court case, held precedent for states across the country. He also led, we were talking about Title X earlier. He led this whole multi-state amicus brief supporting a whole multi-state myriad of lawsuits against the Trump administration. This is with regard to their domestic gag rule, which was really outstanding to see. Another one of our issues that we've talked about today, fetal tissue research, he spoke out right away, urging Secretary Azar and NIH Director Francis Collins to reject the recommendations of this new fetal tissue ethics advisory board and restore funding, federal funding for this critical life-saving research. And he's also had a really, really solid track record on countering the Trump administration's anti-immigration policies. So I think, that's honestly just even top lines, but we've seen very clear commitment to not just reversing and restoring, but also advancing, on a whole front of our policy areas that are important to us here in the rights-based community and the reproductive rights community, and we're really excited to see what he does.
So my question is, not to be Debbie Downer, he's so great. We feel the same way. We feel really great, and will he have his nomination thrown down, or do you think Susan of Many Faces Collins and Lisa Murkowski would actually confirm him and come along with the Democrats to confirm him?
Yeah, we'll have to see. It's hard to comment specifically on, to your point, Susan of Many Faces Collins, they're pro-choice Republicans, but their track record has been all over the place when it comes down to whether or not their belief, I'm not going to say commitment, but belief in reproductive health is going to sway their decisions or not. So I think we'll see. I think some of it also is going to come down to January and these additional 2 seats. So I don't know. I think for us, for Equity Forward, for those of us in the repro community, we are certainly, working with the transition team and continuing to push all of our recommendations and operating under the assumption that as extremely qualified individual, the Senate will see fit to confirm him. But I think you're asking the right questions, looking at the current makeup of the Senate. And, like I got a push notification right before we were doing this interview that like Mitch McConnell finally decided it was time to like maybe acknowledge the results of the election. So like,
after Putin,
nice of him to join us. Like, so that's
literally Vladimir Putin acknowledged Biden's election before Mitch McConnell.
Yeah. So like that is who we're dealing with here. So I mean, I don't have I can't tell into the future in terms of what Mitch and his friends are going to do, but Becerra is a uniquely qualified individual for this position, and we're excited that we should be able to work with him.
Yes, I know. It's exciting to have an abortion forward person for sure.
Yeah, it really is. There honestly was actually a moment, like there was this Monday in December where the Biden-Harris transition team announced like a number of their HHS picks, and there were so many calls in the repro community, just as all of this news unfurled. And I know that I wasn't the only one to actually like get a little bit emotional because we spent 4 years like just really in the trenches, and especially in HHS, like such awful people that are like literally disseminating the offices. Like you have like a ridiculously homophobic person like literally charging the Office of Civil Rights within the Department of Health and Service, like literal just antidotes to everything that these offices should be doing to like defend people and their access to healthcare, their human right to healthcare. And yeah, it wasn't really for me and for like a lot of coworkers and allies, I think, that we actually got this news that there would be like advocates and doctors and
Right.
I know it's a really like low bar, but like it just all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, like it's actually happening. We're actually coming out of this nightmare.
Putting people that are from communities that support these communities, that are medical professionals, and not even abortion tied, but Cori Bush, a great elected official in Missouri, she's a nurse. And like she's someone who's an example of someone who's been really public, and like nurses need to be in reproductive healthcare communities, in COVID communities. Like Biden, you need to look to these folks. You need to look to doulas. You need to look to midwives. You need to incorporate all these folks and their conversations and their knowledge into what reproductive policy is going to now look like.
Absolutely. I'm so excited about Cori Bush. That was like hands down, like honestly, the rest of that like election week was like kind of a black hole / nightmare for me and I think a lot of people. But like that was the one piece of, if there was one piece of good news that actually stemmed from election week, it was like, okay, Cori Bush is going to Congress. Like,
I know, that was excellent. It was excellent.
Yeah.
What do you see then, Molly, as we look forward to 2021, opportunities for federal mandates to, I mean, I guess it's also a question of renewing and reawakening these mandates, because we've touched so much on like what happened wasn't even that Trump decided, oh no, I don't want to explore fetal research, I'm going to just shut everything down. So what do you see as opportunities for us to reinvigorate, to get back to a reactive, pro-reproductive justice, pro-choice, pro-abortion stance, and actually be able to strengthen abortion care through these mandates and these measures that we have available?
Definitely. I mean, I think the good news about a lot of the regulatory action is that it can be reversed as quickly as it was put forward. So that's going to play in our favor here. And a lot of these issues that we have talked through today, from the domestic gag rule to the ban on federal funding for research using fetal tissue, these are like day one actions that that advocates are pushing for in terms of the Biden-Harris administration just coming into office and saying, you know what, no more. Like, so I think that's the first step. But I think after that, it's really going to come down to leadership, as we were just talking to, that is grounded in, the missions of their offices and the expertise that uniquely qualify them for those roles, building back up the programs that will ensure like equitable access to reproductive health and everything else. And I'm not gonna lie, like there's been a lot of damage done, so it may take some time, especially since a lot of these regulatory issues, the ones that pertain to grants, like those are annual processes. Title 10, as an example, like we haven't actually gotten information on the grant application cycle for next year yet. And I've heard rumblings that this might be something that the Trump administration tries to push out like before we even get to Inauguration Day.
Oh, wow.
So it's like there are going to be changes like that we are gearing up for right up until the last minute. And then if you take, a outgoing administration putting forward rules changes like this for an annual grant process, it means like it's going to take the better part of the next year, until the next year, to really restore the integrity of the program with the next round of grant applications.
Can they just
So
create a Title 11, like and call it Title 11, fund it with money that didn't go to Title 10?
Just like throw it all out and start a new
I don't
one.
know. I just feel like, how about if we just create a thing called Title 11 and then we funded for weirdly the exact amount of money it was funded before? I don't know. I'm just saying, this is why I don't run agencies with budgets. But
problem solving.
I'm envisioning your like public comment on the Federal Registrar. Like maybe we should just start a Title 11.
Like, why is this hard?
But like really it shouldn't be. That's the thing. Like it shouldn't be this hard because there were perfectly comprehensive guidelines put in place for this program 4 years ago. And then what did these folks who literally don't believe in birth control and probably don't think that people should even have sex at all, like look at what they did over the course of the past 4 years to make it this hard for the next incoming administration. I'm sorry. I feel like I keep trying to like land on a positive, forward thinking thought on this front, and I do think we have it because the Trump administration is on their way out. But I'm sort of to that end, I am interested in the protections that do take a little bit more time to implement to ensure against this happening again. Because to our earlier conversation around these antis, we know that they're not going away. We know if anything, they're going into government. We know I know most of our conversation today has geared around the domestic and HHS, but we actually also track like the State Department and the international facing agencies. So I'm very familiar with our good friend, Mike Pompeo. We already know he's going to try and run for president in 4 years. So what are we going to do to safeguard these programs that are so important for people just being able to, I don't know, get a cancer screening?
Yeah.
Yep.
I know. I mean, I think that's where, you have to pass legislation and have it stick instead of just having regulations that every time there's a new president, it can be changed.
Right. That's where they tie together. And I think that is actually, that's like the key point to make in terms of the intersection of these two different kinds of policy changes. You have to have both.
Mm-hmm. You have to have both. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I feel like this was a super good talk. And even though you feel like you were Debbie Downer, you were not. You brought really good information. You helped us all figure it out. And I'm looking forward to blabbing with you in 2021 as we see good stuff roll out and helping us figure out how we can activate, our largesse of advocates who really want to move forward. So thank you, Molly, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Likewise.
Be
Thank you
safe.
so much for having me. Yeah. And
Yes, be safe.
happy
and I
happy
hope you have a good
holidays.
holiday. You too. Have a great one.
Happy
I
New
hope you have some
Year.
time off. New
Thank
year,
you.
new president. Who dis? Thanks,
I'll cheers
Molly.
to that. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow. Lot of info. Lot of info.
A lot of busybodies who have a lot of say in our shit.
And I know we didn't even get into this, and you all have heard me preach on it because I worked at a university for 10 years prior to coming to AAF, helping folks get funding. There are so many amazing researchers, scientists, grad students that were working with fetal tissue. Like that's what we do for ALS. That's what we do for MS. That's what we do. Like, how do you think polio has been like close to eradicated in much of the world? It is through R&D and through utilizing science, and just the fact that they could comfortably shut all of that down is disgusting to me.
I mean, you do, of course, realize a lot of their constituency doesn't believe in vaccines, right? So,
No.
Right?
I'm like,
their body, their choice, right? You know?
Exactly. I'm like, they believe in Santa, but vaccines?
Sky Daddy, but not vaccines.
And there's a lot of like research wings of universities that are trying to do it on the QT.
Yes.
That don't want people to know because if they get found out, you know, their program will be shut down. And so, yeah, it's really just disgusting. And I'm hoping that, you know, Joe Biden is such a non-confrontational. Let's just move ahead. And, you know, you can't move ahead without A, learning about the shit that happened, and B, really being profoundly committed to these issues. And that's something that Joe Biden isn't. I'm really glad to hear that he's surrounding himself with some people who are.
Yeah.
You know, as we talked last week on the podcast, you know, I really want to know who are in the rooms, who are the ones with their ear telling them who to pick, telling them who not to pick. And I really am excited. I want to see more cabinet heads who have an interest towards understanding the intersections of reproductive health rights and justice with all other issues and why it matters. So that's something to look forward to for sure. But she dropped some knowledge, man.
I found it encouraging when she was like, oh, we're excited about who we're seeing. I felt like that was encouraging because I'm not a researcher. And so just hearing that like the researchers in my field like are like, okay, these people that are these names we're seeing make us excited. That's really comforting.
I agree. I think that is comforting too. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that's good. I think that's a good place to end it.
Yes, this is great. Thank you all. You staying with us. You rode it out to the third trimester.
Yes.
This title, 40 weeks, is concluded. So please, as always, like we do this for free, Abortion Access Force, we're out here. So you can help support that and amplify us by giving us a review. Hop on online, 5 stars. It's the best way for your communities, for other communities to see our podcast. Also, funding. Prop us some donations. You can follow us on our social medias and you can see those ways to donate to us. Go to social at Access Force on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everything. We're on TikTok. So it's a great way for you to see what our output is and you to see, hey, can I support? Can I assist all year round, not just during the holidays? You can email us at podcast@aaforce.org. We get those emails. We love to see them. Moji's going to model some cool swag for us.
Woo! And I have my mug.
We've got mugs. Our sister organization, Abortion Access Front, has some really, really awesome stuff online. So take a look, see what kind of stocking stuffers do you need available? Do you need to send that relative who just won't listen a coffee mug? Tell them to shut up and just pay attention to a little bit bodily autonomy, what's going on. So please reach out. Always a huge thank you to Brad Pearson, who's our awesome podcast editor, and then Cory Eischen, who with the Purple Xperience did our theme song. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. And as always, until next time, may the Abortion Access Force be with you. Bye.
Bye.